In this episode, we're going to build a simple but durable way to separate strategic, operational, and tactical threat intelligence, because beginners often hear these labels and assume they are just fancy categories. In reality, these levels describe different time horizons, different audiences, and different kinds of decisions, and mixing them up can make intelligence feel confusing or useless. When you can separate them quickly, you become better at understanding what a stakeholder is actually asking for, and you become better at producing intelligence that fits the need. This distinction also helps on the exam, because many questions quietly test whether you understand what kind of intelligence is appropriate for the situation. The goal is not to memorize 3 definitions and move on. The goal is to develop a mental sorting skill that works automatically when you hear a question, read a scenario, or think about a real-world problem. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful starting point is to treat the 3 levels like different camera lenses, because each one shows a different type of detail and a different type of meaning. Strategic intelligence is like a wide-angle lens that captures the big landscape, including trends, risk posture, and decisions about investment and policy. Operational intelligence is like a medium lens that captures campaigns and real-world activity patterns that affect what a team should prepare for in the near term. Tactical intelligence is like a zoom lens that captures concrete technical details that can be used to detect, block, or investigate specific activity. All 3 can be valuable, but they are valuable in different ways, and confusion happens when you try to use the wrong lens for the job. If an executive needs to decide where to allocate resources, tactical details may be too granular to be useful. If a defender needs to tune detection, strategic trends may be too vague to help. The lens metaphor keeps you focused on fit rather than on status. Strategic intelligence is designed to support longer-term decisions, usually at the leadership level, where the questions are about direction rather than immediate response. A strategic consumer might ask what threats are most relevant to the organization's industry, what adversary capabilities are evolving, or how geopolitical or economic conditions may influence targeting over the next quarter or year. The output at this level often looks like assessments and summaries that connect threats to business impact, risk tolerance, and investment choices. It does not mean strategic intelligence is non-technical, but it means the technical details are used to support an argument about risk and priority, not to guide a specific alert rule. The time horizon is usually measured in months and quarters rather than hours and days. The success test is whether leaders can make clearer decisions about what to fund, what to prioritize, and what to communicate. Operational intelligence sits in the middle, and beginners sometimes struggle with it because it is less famous than strategic and less concrete than tactical. Operational intelligence is about understanding adversary activity in a way that informs planning and readiness, often over weeks to months. This includes recognizing campaigns, observing how an adversary tends to move through an environment, and understanding what targets, methods, and dependencies are involved. The consumer is often a security team lead, an incident manager, or a detection and response team that needs to plan workflows and focus areas. Operational intelligence might answer questions like what kinds of initial access methods are being seen against organizations like ours, what technology stack is being exploited in current campaigns, and what we should prepare for if a certain actor becomes active in our region. The output is usually more detailed than strategic, but it still emphasizes patterns and implications rather than individual indicators. The success test is whether teams can prepare, prioritize monitoring, and coordinate response more effectively. Tactical intelligence is the most concrete level, and it is often what people imagine first when they hear the phrase threat intelligence. Tactical intelligence is the details that can be directly used in detection, blocking, and investigation, like suspicious network artifacts, specific behavioral signals, or technical indicators tied to observed activity. The audience is often analysts and defenders who need to take immediate action in systems, workflows, and triage. The time horizon is usually short, like days or even hours, because technical details can become stale quickly as adversaries rotate infrastructure and change tools. Tactical outputs can include patterns that help identify malicious activity, but they must be handled carefully because without context they can produce noise and false alarms. The success test is whether defenders can detect and respond faster and with fewer wasted cycles. Tactical intelligence is powerful, but it is also fragile if it is not validated and maintained. One fast way to separate the three is to listen for what decision is being supported, because the decision type usually reveals the intelligence level. If the decision is about budget, staffing, long-term risk, or policy direction, you are likely in strategic territory. If the decision is about preparedness, focus areas, response planning, or understanding an active campaign, you are likely in operational territory. If the decision is about blocking, alerting, triage, or specific investigative steps, you are likely in tactical territory. This decision-first approach works even when the scenario contains mixed detail, because the exam often includes technical flavor text even when the question is really about a higher-level choice. Beginners sometimes get pulled toward the most technical-looking option because it feels specific and therefore correct, but specificity is not the same as appropriateness. The right level is the one that matches the consumer's decision. Another fast sorting trick is to evaluate the expected lifespan of the intelligence product. Strategic intelligence should remain meaningful even as details change, because it is about trends, risk, and broad relevance. Operational intelligence has a medium lifespan because it is tied to campaigns and activity patterns that can persist for weeks or months, but still evolve. Tactical intelligence often has the shortest lifespan because indicators can expire quickly and detection logic must be updated as adversaries adapt. If the output is something you would expect to reread 6 months from now to guide leadership thinking, it is probably strategic. If the output is something you would expect to use while tracking a campaign and coordinating a response plan this month, it is probably operational. If the output is something you would expect to use immediately in detection and then retire or refresh soon, it is probably tactical. Lifespan is not perfect, but it is a very fast filter for beginners. It is also important to understand that the levels are not competing because many new learners think of them as 3 separate buckets that never touch. In reality, good intelligence programs connect them so that strategic insights guide what operational monitoring matters and operational understanding guides what tactical signals are worth acting on. For example, a strategic assessment might identify that a certain industry is being targeted through a particular technology dependency, which can shape investment and readiness priorities. Operational intelligence might then track how that targeting is happening in current campaigns, including common intrusion paths and objectives. Tactical intelligence might then provide the specific signals that help defenders detect those paths in their own environment. This connection is how intelligence becomes coherent rather than chaotic. When the levels align, teams stop arguing about what matters and start moving in the same direction. A common misconception is that strategic intelligence is just vague storytelling for executives, while tactical intelligence is the only real intelligence because it feels actionable. This misconception usually appears because tactical artifacts are easier to see and easier to imagine using. The reality is that strategic intelligence can be highly actionable if action is defined as making decisions about investment, priorities, and risk communication. An executive might decide to accelerate a security initiative, adjust vendor requirements, or approve additional monitoring based on strategic assessments. Those are real actions, and they can have larger impact than any single block rule. Another misconception is that operational intelligence is optional, when it is often the glue that makes tactical actions coherent and makes strategic decisions grounded. When you understand operational intelligence, you can explain why certain tactical actions matter and how they fit into a campaign narrative. In other words, each level is real, but each level acts on a different scale. Beginners also need to recognize how the wrong level can create failure, because it makes the distinction feel urgent rather than academic. If you give tactical indicators to a leadership audience without context, you can cause confusion or unnecessary fear, and you can waste time explaining what each detail means. If you give strategic trend summaries to an analyst who needs to investigate an active alert, you can frustrate them and slow down response. If you treat operational intelligence like tactical intelligence and demand exact indicators when the goal is readiness planning, you can miss the bigger pattern and underprepare. These failures happen because the intelligence product does not match the consumer's need and time horizon. The exam will often test this indirectly by offering multiple answers that are all plausible, but only one is at the correct level for the scenario. If you train yourself to match level to decision, you avoid these traps naturally. To separate the levels quickly during exam questions, it helps to practice a simple mental rewrite of the question in your own words. Ask yourself, what are they really trying to decide, and who is the person making that decision? If the scenario mentions executives, budget, or long-term planning, interpret the ask as strategic even if there are technical distractions. If the scenario mentions an active campaign, planning response, or prioritizing monitoring, interpret the ask as operational even if there are a few indicators mentioned. If the scenario mentions blocking, alerts, or investigative artifacts, interpret the ask as tactical even if it references broader threats. This rewrite step only takes a few seconds, but it forces clarity. It also reduces the chance that you pick an answer that is correct in general but wrong for the situation. As you become more comfortable, you can also notice that each level tends to use different language, and that language can serve as a quick clue. Strategic intelligence tends to emphasize risk, impact, trends, and business relevance, often using words like prioritize, invest, exposure, and likelihood. Operational intelligence tends to emphasize campaigns, patterns, readiness, and coordination, using words like monitor, anticipate, track, and prepare. Tactical intelligence tends to emphasize concrete artifacts and immediate actions, using words like detect, block, identify, and investigate. These are not strict rules, but they are common signals that can help beginners sort quickly. When you pair language cues with decision cues and lifespan cues, your accuracy improves significantly. The exam often expects this kind of layered reasoning, where you use multiple hints to choose the best match. To close, separating strategic, operational, and tactical intelligence fast is really about learning to match intelligence to the decision, the audience, and the time horizon. Strategic intelligence guides longer-term direction and investment by explaining relevant threats in a way leaders can act on. Operational intelligence bridges the gap by describing campaigns and patterns that shape readiness and focus in the near term. Tactical intelligence supports immediate defense and investigation through concrete signals that can be applied quickly, but that also require careful validation and upkeep. When you learn to sort by decision type, expected lifespan, and consumer needs, you stop being distracted by the amount of technical detail and start choosing the right lens for the job. That skill will help you answer exam questions more confidently, and it will also help you communicate intelligence more effectively in real environments where time and attention are always limited.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.